For many years, UFOs have been blurred, indistinguishable lights in the sky. Until now.
There are alien creatures visiting this planet who were captured by the militaries.
They are hiding. They do have captured aliens in Brazil alive.
We can prove that alien beings had really visited our planet.
In the early months of 1996, Brazil, it is claimed, was the unwitting victim of an alien invasion, and one small town, Varginha, was at the center of it. A minor industrial town of 100,000 inhabitants, none of them realizing that they were soon to be driven into a panic by the extraordinary events that would engulf them.
About 2 a.m. in the morning of the January 20th, some satellites from the United States detected an object entering Earth's atmosphere.
American NORAD alerted the Brazilian authorities because we don't have this kind of defense satellite system.
As soon as it became clear that whatever it was that the radar was picking up had entered Brazilian airspace, the Air Force was scrambled.
As soon as they got above Brazil in our atmosphere, our defense system captured the images. We call those little points in the radar, we call them plots. So one of the plots started to lose altitude, and it was going lower, lower, down and down, and disappeared.
While this object was falling down, it was observed by a few witnesses. It was very strange because some of them could describe an object like a cigar-shaped format.
It was around 1 o'clock in the morning, and we saw an object flying over with a lot of smoke coming from it. So I called my husband over, and we both looked at it.
I started to ask, what was this? It was some kind of submarine flying over. It was long, and on its rear it seemed like there were bits flying behind it, like when you tie ribbons to a fan. It was the size of a minibus, with lots of smoke. I have never seen anything like it in my life.
Two conclusions: something landed or something crashed. So they got the coordinates, latitude and longitude, and looked for the nearest military facility, and it was the Army school here,
which happens to be only 20 miles away from Virginia.
The Army school was alerted by the Air Force that an unidentified craft had crashed.
So the Army school knew everything that was going on.
But the public themselves were now beginning to report strange lights in the sky, and some talked of having seen a crash, but not a plane crash. Something more consistent with this, an out-of-control missile. These public reports had now put the fire brigade on red alert. They went to where the reports of the crash had come from, but they had a surprise waiting for them.
When they arrived there, the Army was already there.
The fire brigade linked up with the Army in a joint operation. No crashed craft was found in this operation, but what they did find, according to reports, was even more amazing.
The creatures probably abandoned the place in order not to be captured, probably waiting for rescue, but the rescue never came.
The creature offered no resistance at all to its capture. It almost couldn't move. It was so fragile.
They wrapped this creature in a net. And put inside this 1 by 1 square meters wood box and gave it straight to the militaries who went there to pick it up.
The mysterious cargo was taken back to the army school.
Now, this was during the morning, all right? The capture took place about 10:30 or so. At that same afternoon, not knowing anything about this, these three girls
were working in a house. They were cleaning the house. And when they finished their work, they were returning home.
It was around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and we were coming home from work. We took a shortcut through Jardim Andoré on our way to Santana, where we live.
We saw this very strange creature, but it didn't notice us at all at first. It was brown, and its skin looked very soft. The sun was shining on it, and it looked like the outside of a heart. The eyes were big, round, and red, and there were 3 horns on its head, and visible veins on its arms.
And all of a sudden, it just moved its neck like this and faced the girls.
They were very frightened. They thought they were being faced with the devil himself. They ran away, arriving at home hysterical with fright.
So they just ran away, got home, and told Mama.
Mommy, we just saw the devil. And the mother said, the mother is a very brave woman. She said, no devil is going to play with my kids. And she managed to get to the location.
She saw 2 footprints, and it was big ones like this. And she felt a terrible smell of ammonia.
The original creature captured by the army was also now in Virginia, being transferred from the army school to the local hospital.
They didn't know what to do with that creature at that time, so they took it to regional hospital.
I ask you, our authorities, wouldn't they be smart enough to realize that it would attract so much attention from everybody? Because they took a creature not from this planet to a hospital, which is the main hospital in the whole region. Everybody will see it, as a few doctors saw, as a few nurses saw, a few patients saw. They have to isolate a whole branch of the hospital to put the creature in.
According to witness testimonies, doctors were unable to do anything for the creature, and so it had to be moved again.
But when they realized that the creature couldn't stay there, they had to move the creature in a military operation. So everybody's on the street. It's a Saturday night. Plenty of heat, you know, because of the summer. Lots of people saw the military operation conducting the creature from this hospital to another hospital, which is more discreet because that one is a public hospital.
Unfortunately, the trail of the captured being goes cold at the Humanitas hospital.
People started to talk about this, and everybody wanted to know, demanding answers. The fire brigade denied everything, military police denied everything, and the army school here didn't say a thing.
But the military's explanation for the events of that night are almost more extraordinary than the claims being made by the UFO researchers.
What happened was that on the 20th January 1996, there were violent storms in Virginia. Here in Tres Cruces, we were having a ceremony. We also had to send some truck for maintenance while they were still under guarantee. So we sent 2 trucks into Virginia for this to happen. To further complicate the story, there were more coincidences relating to the events. At the hospital in Virginia, there was an expectant dwarf couple, which coincided with Eza taking the creature in a truck to the hospital in Virginia.
Well, the town was just going insane because everybody was on the streets, because many UFOs were sighted at that time. So people was just connecting one thing to another.
The tide of panic in Virginia grew. Inevitably, the media quickly picked up the story.
The press got involved in the first day. We have news in Brazil, 8 o'clock, and in that news you could see the girls in the area, Jardim Andere district. So the press was trying to give information to the public in the first day, and I think they were on our side since the very beginning, which is not common, as we know, in other places. The press is very skeptical.
In general, the major circulation newspapers and magazines and the national wild TV programs, radio programs, whatever, they all gave us all support.
The original Roswell expert, Stanton Friedman, appreciated the media's attitude.
The Brazilian press played Varginha pretty straight. There's a long article in a weekly news magazine here. I think that encouraged a lot more witnesses to come forward, and that's good. Anytime the press is fair, not biased pro, but fair, treat it the same way you would any other story, a significant news story, that encourages people to come forward.
It didn't take the authorities long to clamp down on the favorable press coverage. The military held their own press conference.
When the reporters and the whole press jumped on them, they refused to answer anything, and they said also you cannot film from the streets our facilities. And they started to frighten the reporters, like, you're going to have a problem. You can't do this, you can't do that.
Some of the gentlemen who performed the capture came to us and gave full report of what's going on. Now, it's not second-hand report. Those reports came from people who actually helped to capture, to hold the creatures. So this is the best report someone can have.
We believe that if this case is definitely proved to be true, then it is as important, if not more important, than the case of Roswell.
I wish the Americans have a report of someone holding the Roswell creatures back 50 years ago.
The notion that the Varginha case is the Brazilian Roswell isn't too far off the mark. I mean, it's got involvement of medical people, of military people, of a number of local witnesses, plus more sophisticated witnesses. It seems to involve creatures and a crash and government interest and U.S. government involvement, too, as far as we can tell. On the other hand, there are a number of differences, too. Roswell, of course, I began the research roughly 20 years ago, so there's been plenty of time. A lot of other people have participated. The Roswell case had press coverage, short-lived. You got to find the right newspapers, evening papers for July 8th from Chicago West. That's a small category. We've been able to find a lot of the people with Roswell because it was a base yearbook, there were reunion groups. You know, it makes it a little easier. An important thing is that we have the testimony from big-shot military people, if you want. We don't have that yet, to the best of my knowledge. Open, sworn testimony from important military people involved in the case.
It was a lawyer, Ubirajara Rodriguez, who was the first person to break the story.
What we can say from the evidence, the maximum we can say, is that there is not the slightest bit of doubt that everything did happen. We say this not only because we have heard from people from the town who were indirectly involved, but with people who participated in the principal events.
Although medical staff and the military have given first-hand testimony to researchers, they are unwilling to reveal their identities.
Espero que você entenda. Se você mencionar meu nome, eu serei apagado do mapa.
One of the soldiers was carrying a sack where, as far as I could make out, something was moving inside.
I do not think that any of our principal witnesses are lying. None of them. Not the civilians or the military. The statements are concrete, and I believe in the sincerity of all of them.
Well, it was very hard for me to get all this military personnel to give me information, but I got it. And I'm not talking about only soldiers. I'm talking about high-ranking people. I'm talking about lieutenants, majors, captains, sergeants.
Many of the witnesses to the incidents were traced and told not to reveal any more information. Some of the military witnesses who were involved were threatened in a very serious manner by their superiors and told not to release any more information about the case to anyone, even if they did not know who they were giving information to.
The military were threatened by their superior. Don't talk about this to anybody.
But they all told me the same thing, the characteristics, the whole operation, time, who was involved, who was coordinating, what kind of equipment was used. So they all confirmed everything.
One nurse who has been working for the same institution, for the same hospital for over 20 years, was threatened. The principal called her and said, hey, you're not supposed to talk about this to anybody, because if you do, you better start looking for another job.
There are other differences that I'm curious about as much as anything. The description of the bodies connected with the Varginha case makes it sound much more like they were cargo than crew. They seemed to be woozy, they didn't have any clothes, the little horns, the color of the skin and stuff. Their reactions did not imply particularly high intelligence. Now, who knows, maybe this was a crew from a different place, and we don't know what their mental capabilities were or something like that. But you just don't get the feeling, looking at the drawings that have been made, the testimony of the witnesses, that we're dealing with particularly sophisticated aliens here. And I can imagine a cargo craft that ran into some kind of a problem, pilot error is common apparently, in which these guys were set loose and weren't really the operators of the craft. Now with Roswell, I don't have that indication. The bodies seem to be directly connected with the craft, one-piece spacesuits. I'm not saying being nude means anything particularly here, but just a different level of sophistication. I'd also like to know something we didn't have any capability of doing back in '47, observations of things crashing from the sky, that is, spy satellites. There's an awful lot of sophisticated equipment up there, looking for re-entry of an American satellite, of a Russian satellite, or a flying saucer. So, did we know it was coming down? Was word sent to the Brazilian Air Force? What's the involvement of the American government? Brazilians don't have a lot of spy satellites up there, but the American and Russian governments do. So, there's a larger picture here. I don't know of any previous cases where beings like this were seen before. Maybe this is a new step in what's going on. I don't know. So there are a lot of puzzles here.
3 months later, just when everyone was starting to calm down, alien beings, it seemed, returned once more to Virginia. A local woman claimed that she saw a creature fitting the same description given back in January by the 3 girls. This incident occurred while she was attending a party at the local zoo.
I went outside to have a cigarette onto the balcony, and I saw something really ugly. It was dark brown and had big, bulging red eyes. It was really ugly. I'm sure it wasn't an animal.
It is a coincidence that around the same time as the sighting of this creature, we were having problems.
And there were actually some animals that had died since February. I lost 5 animals, but we do not know why. There was no scientific explanation, and nothing came to light in any post-mortem examinations. This is very strange. I have been director at this zoo for 7 years, and there has never been anything like this.
So what is the legacy of this succession of extraordinary and still unexplained events?
I think we're just having the biggest opportunity to prove that the mankind had some contact with alien creatures. The Roswell incident is a very important one, but it happened 50 years ago. This is recent. We have a lot of information from military sources, civilian sources. I mean fresh information. I've made many videos with military witnesses and civilian witnesses. It's really frustrating to have them in my possession and not being able to show it to the public, to the colleagues and all the UFO community. It's quite convincing because it's almost impossible for them to be telling me all that information if they were not really involved in the whole situation.
It's just unbelievably undeniable. Undeniable. Now, it doesn't matter what the military say, they are hiding. They are hiding. They do have captured aliens in Brazil alive.
One of the good things about the Varginha case is that presumably almost all the witnesses are still alive and will be for some time. I didn't start serious investigation, the serious investigation of Roswell, until 1978, 31 years after it happened. And many of the key witnesses died in the next 10 years, not surprisingly. So we've got some hope here. If major effort is expended to get more witnesses, especially the insiders, the guys at the hospital, the military guys who grabbed and so forth, then there's certainly a good chance we can find those people. So I envy the people here and having some time to work with.
When the perfect time comes up, I will be presenting this information in the World Wide Net. It will be in the CNN news, it will be in United Kingdom, it will be in the whole world. But yes, I intend to do it. But if I do it right now, probably somebody's going to jail tomorrow. Because I do believe we were visited by alien creatures, and I want to know what happened to these creatures.
Brought out to the site and given briefings and finally shown what I was going to be working on.
This is the story of a man who doesn't exist.
And I felt it was really worthwhile to tell somebody.
And of a place which also doesn't exist. It's a story of conspiracy, cover-ups, fear and secrecy.
They threatened to kill my wife.
Hidden in the heart of the American desert.
They said they'd stop at nothing.
Guarded by a force who will shoot any intruder just to prove this place does not exist.
They were crazy. They really were. They were completely out of control.
70 miles outside Las Vegas in the Nevada desert, there's an area the size of Switzerland that no one claims to know anything about. Since the end of World War II, this barren landscape has hidden a mystery. Some call it Groom Lake, others Dreamland, but most know it best as Area 51. It is the US military's most closely guarded secret.
Area 51 to this day is not acknowledged. That is to say, the Air Force does not admit that it exists.
In the absence of facts, myths have taken root and spread. Some say flying saucers are being tested here, And not only that, but these sources are not of human invention, but a joint project between the military and an intelligence from beyond Earth. A crazy idea is the usual response, but it is generally agreed that there is something going on there, a secret which the military will go to extraordinary lengths to protect.
The test base that's called Area 51 out at Groom Lake in Nevada dates back to the mid-1950s when the Central Intelligence Agency and Lockheed needed a flight test base for the U-2 spy plane.
At that time in particular, out in Nevada, there's tens of thousands of square miles of nothing. That was before Las Vegas became a big city and stuff. So you want an area that you can keep people out of. And this is before satellites. So that there's no way anybody can find out what you're doing.
In recent years, Area 51 has become a magnet for the curious. They gather here at the little Ailey Inn in the town of Rachel to swap saucer stories, pick up an ET souvenir, or trade conspiracy theories. And some visitors never find their way home, enthusiastic amateurs snared by the legends that surround the place.
Well, the majority of the activities are routine, day-to-day research and development of new spy-type aircraft, stealth-type aircraft. But there is a section which is located a little bit south of the Groom Lake facility itself, where they apparently have, for lack of a better name, alien technology.
Strange dancing lights are a common sight above Area 51. One might hope to see a distant display as often as once a week. But amateurs aren't the only ones drawn to the area. Bob Exler, a former NASA scientist, has immersed himself in the subject.
This is an area that has been known but officially denied for many decades. We go back quite a ways into the 40s and 50s with the development of the U-2 spy plane, the SR-71. All of our super secret aircraft have been developed and test flown out in this particular area. So it only makes sense that if you have something as sophisticated as a flying saucer and the related technology to that, that would certainly be one of the prime locations you'd want to go.
The security around Area 51 is fairly extensive. There are sensors both inside and outside of the boundaries. There are a large number of patrolling security vehicles, which are all white Jeep Cherokees, that roam the boundaries and outside the boundaries, keeping an eye on people near the base. There are directional microphones that are hidden in the brush, proximity sensors, motion detectors, ammonia sensors, which can sniff out a human from an animal because of the ammonia in their perspiration.
This extreme level of security also extends to those who work inside the base.
When you go to work out at those locations, you sign away your constitutional rights. You sign a piece of paper saying that if you violate your security agreement and you discuss programs that you're working on without a trial, without right of appeal, you're going to go to Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary for 20 years. That's a real big incentive to keep your mouth shut.
One man who failed to keep his mouth shut was a physicist and engineer who claimed he had worked at the base. And not only that, but that he had worked on the most top-secret project there, flying saucers. His name is Bob Lazar. An unconventional man with a past shrouded in shadows, he claims never to have made any money from his story. But many still believe it too absurd, and Lazar himself just a Walter Mitty fantasist.
You've essentially opened up a whole new world, and now you know there's a whole universe and other life out there, and you have to pretend that doesn't exist when you come home. I wanted some people to know what was going on.
He's a pretty serious guy. He does have a sense of humor, but he's certainly not a clown, and I knew him before he was in the program. I met his family, his wife's family. He had taken me to Los Alamos. I met people who worked with him when he worked there, so I certainly did not suspect that it was a story he fabricated, or even that would be a possibility.
I thought UFOs were pretty much a figment of someone's imagination. I didn't believe in them. I wasn't interested in them. Of course, I'm not even interested in them now. But I certainly do believe in them now. I was to work on the reactor that was removed from the craft in the lab, and one of the gravity amplifiers that was removed from the craft and in the lab. So that's where I spent all my time. However, I was allowed in the craft on one occasion to see the placement of these systems in case it was important to their operation. There was a hatch, a hole, an opening. The door wasn't on, and it was obviously removed, or never existed for all I know. But there was a ladder to go up and go inside it. So I don't know how it's sealed. I just imagine that they had removed the hatch. It was obviously made to be piloted by something smaller than the average human being, very cramped in there. There was a sub-level where a little collapsing floor member opened, and I could stick my head and upper torso down underneath with a flashlight to see how the gravity amplifiers hung upside down. At one point when I was in the craft, one of the archways became transparent. There were some technicians working on something else that I had no knowledge of. So, and also something began to scroll up on the screen. So it might have been possible that the skin of the craft, whether under electrical influence or something else, could at times become either transparent to look outside or be used as some sort of video screen. That was pretty amazing. When I went outside and looked at it, it looked as if it was just a plain piece of metal again. There were 3 seats, 3 amplifiers that looked like boxes. You could call them consoles, but there were no instrumentation buttons or anything on them. To complicate things further, there was no wiring anywhere. The seats were very small. I'd say about 1/3 to 1/4 the size of a normal human seat. Walking in the craft was an ominous feeling, a feeling that you shouldn't be there. It was by no means exciting. It was really unearthly, and I don't mean that as a pun, but it really was.
However, Lazar is always careful to underline the fact that he never saw anything that could be described as an alien being.
I was brought into the hangar for one of the short-duration tests, and the craft was already outside on the lake bed, and lifted off silently and just drifted around for a bit and set back down, and that was pretty much of a marvelous sight. It's a huge thing. It's like seeing a house lift off the ground quietly. It's just, you can't imagine the energy involved to do that and not to make any noise at all. So I can only assume that there were humans on board, and somehow they had managed to squeeze themselves into those little seats or put something in there to sit on, and obviously they knew how to operate whatever controls there was, or fabricate their own, or retrofit it with something.
This secret became a burden Lazar couldn't bear to carry, even though he knew the risks involved in telling the truth.
Agents from the OFI, the Office of Federal Investigation, had been witnessed doing random security checks at his house. There was almost no question in anyone's mind, anyone in Bob's immediate life who talked with him on the telephone, that his phone was tapped. I mean, strange things would happen on Bob's phone, and really continue to this day, which happens with no one else you talk to in your entire environment.
And I felt it was really worthwhile to tell somebody.
So Lazar arranged a nighttime excursion for himself and some close friends.
I believe it was 8 or 9 o'clock on a Wednesday night, somewhere in March, '89, I believe. We went out with Gene Huff, my ex-wife, and John Lear. At that time, there were no signs up. Really, no one knew what was going on. There was no alien. There was a little Rachel Bar and Grill up there, but you could drive in a lot further than you could now. There was really no security patrols going on. No one had even bothered the area. So we did get in pretty far and get some good looks at what was going on.
There was an elliptically shaped light that came up and did step moves in the sky and danced around, and essentially looked like you'd see a flying saucer portrayed in the movies.
Darting from one side of the sky to the other, doing some impossible flight characteristics.
It looks like an explosion that starts to explode and stops and doesn't explode and dissipate. That's how bright the light is. Your brain interprets it as an explosion about to happen.
I believe we saw some other chase helicopters or some other craft come up and follow it around, and it set back down.
Considering the fact that Bob predicted when the test would be, he had described what the motion would be before we went there. When we saw it, it proved to be exhilarating. It was an amazing experience, and it did everything Bob said it would do. It came up at the time he said it would, and so I had to believe it.
But at times the craft had, glowed tremendously bright, where we thought, being miles and miles away, we thought there was something wrong and the craft was going to explode, so much so that we all got behind the car. So it was pretty exciting.
They made 3 visits in all. On the 3rd, the inevitable happened. They were caught.
That night when we got stopped, I would imagine would be the turning point where things turned really bad. I was taken to the Indian Springs Auxiliary Air Force Base and debriefed there. And there they had some of the guards that had caught us. Dennis Mariani, my supervisor, some other people down there. They threatened my wife. They threatened to kill my wife. They said they'd stop at nothing. They were crazy. They really were. They were completely out of control.
Bob went public to protect himself.
And I knew immediately if his credentials could be verified, if even part of his story could be verified, it'd be one tremendous expose.
I would say initially, when George first started looking at everything, it was skeptical. However, very quickly after he started checking a few things, I began to take it very seriously. And when it was aired, that interview went virtually around the world. I mean, I saw that was something that was just put in the 5 o'clock news here in Las Vegas, and I have seen that tape played in Japan.
Several people began to examine his past. Had he really worked at Area 51? Was he even qualified to have done so?
I did a variety of research relative to Bob Lazar. I actually met him. I obtained a copy of his, what they call a W-2 form, which is one of the IRS documents associated with pay. His particular form indicated that he worked for the U.S. Department of Naval Intelligence. My investigation of this document and the claims that Bob Lazar made followed a very strict path of sound research. I contacted the U.S. Department of Naval Intelligence and indeed verified that they were likely responsible for presenting that W-2. I investigated the issue with the Internal Revenue Service. They informed me the exact words were, it appears to be legit, that it was a genuine document. It was not something that had been fabricated. There were a variety of numbers, contract numbers and so forth, issued on the document, which I was able to research, again finding that these were highly classified numbers. In fact, Internal Revenue Service ran into a brick wall when it came to trying to track down the actual employer associated with the document. And then again, with the Social Security Administration, we found that Bob Lazar's records had in fact been bleached clean. There was nothing there, in spite of the fact that the document clearly indicated that Social Security taxes had been taken out of his pay.
Not all are convinced. Noted ufologist and former Apollo scientist Stanton Friedman is skeptical.
I've looked at considerable depth into Bob Lazar's claims, both about himself and about propulsion system. Those are fairly elaborate claims. I've talked to the schools that he claims to have received degrees from. I've checked on his high school record. I talked to Los Alamos Lab, where he was supposedly a scientist and so forth. I have come up totally empty, except for finding that he did attend some classes at Pierce Junior College in Southern California in the late 70s.
I probably would never have taken on the task of investigating Bob Lazar's W-2 form had it not been for the fact that he passed a seriously applied polygraph examination. And the thing that is interesting about polygraph is that if you're embellishing or if you don't completely believe what you're saying, it is very, very easy to detect. All it really will tell you is that the individual believes with 100% conviction that what he's reporting is exactly as he recalls and as he believes it to be. And that clearly was the case with Bob Lazar.
Could the U.S. military really be working with alien technology? And if they are, do they have any choice in the matter? US Navy physicist Dr. Bruce Maccabee has his own theories. He spends his free time using computer technology to examine the veracity of video and photographic evidence of UFO sightings, many of them from Area 51.
There has been the question ever since 1947 of whether or not these objects could be made by human beings. Now, I wouldn't rule out the possibility that we might nowadays be able to build something with somewhat comparable characteristics. However, when this began, that was a demonstrably impossible situation. Not only that, but we have an interesting confirmation of the fact that the Air Force didn't make anything. In 1947, in the summer, the Air Force asked the FBI to investigate witnesses to these flying discs. And somebody suggested to one of the FBI agents that, gee, maybe they're our things. And Hoover, J. Edgar Hoover, who was the head of the FBI at the time, decided that it wasn't a good idea for us to be investigating our own things. And he says, if we're going to investigate, we want a statement from the Air Force that we're not investigating our own secret projects. Air Force wrote to J. Edgar Hoover a letter saying we've checked all of our research projects, etc. You know, this would be not just the Air Force, but the Navy and the Army, everybody. And we have nothing that could create these flying disc sightings. So that rules it out right there. I mean, the Air Force was denying any involvement at all, and they were just as worried about what these things were as everybody else.
One man with special experience of outer space and cutting-edge technology is former astronaut and sixth man on the moon, Edgar Mitchell. Since being a part of the Apollo missions, he is now on the outside, trying to peer behind the wall of secrecy.
The thing that's convinced me that contact has been made is individuals in government positions, high government positions, who are credible, who have reported to me that in their official duties they have had first-hand experience and they're prepared to talk about it, would like to be released from security oaths so that they can talk about it.
I got a lot of calls from former workers at the base. I have now talked, in the years since, I have interviewed or talked to people who worked there in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, who all tell basically the same story. Not all of them have the same breadth and depth of the story that Bob is telling. Are consistent in that they saw these craft, disc-shaped craft, they saw them fly, they saw them stored in crates or under tarps, that there was an incredible amount of secrecy, that no one was allowed to talk about this stuff. That story is consistent.
So, is Lazar telling the truth as he saw it? Is he simply lying? Is he being used by the government to spread disinformation? Or is he an unwitting spokesman for that same government and preparing us for something even larger?
He's a bright guy who tells a great tale and who's told it often to people who have not checked on him, who accept the notion that, well, the government wiped his slate clean.
I'm the one that couldn't find any records or any, I mean, I'm the one that brought that up, because I was the first one to run into that. Initially, I couldn't get a hold of my birth certificate either, and that was one of the things that concerned me, is they might be trying to make me essentially a non-person.
I'm satisfied that he did, in fact, work out there. And I'm also satisfied that the prospects are very, very good, that this was a test to determine just how much the public and the scientific community might accept when someone was to be brought in, exposed to some of the program, and then in turn release that information to the public in some form.
If we are being softened up for a dramatic revelation, what might it be?
I think that undeniably and unquestionably we have been and are being visited by extraterrestrials, but quite what their motives are and quite what's going on, the jury is still out on that one.
I have no doubts whatsoever that the United States has actually recovered a number of extraterrestrial vehicles.
I find that exceedingly distressing, frightening, the ultimate big brother scenario. Because if this technology is real at all, it's a very, very powerful technology and should be in the public domain, not in a private domain.
I felt very privileged to be part of what was going on, but the atmosphere was very oppressive, the security was very tight, and the fact that you couldn't talk to anybody and you knew your phones were being monitored, so on and so forth, made it a very, very difficult place to work and a very difficult thing to be working in the 28th or 29th century and come back to the 20th century and deal with everything else.
Although skeptical about Bob Lazar, Stanton Friedman has little doubt about Area 51's purpose.
I would expect that some of the truth may very well lie out in the desert near Groom Lake, outside Las Vegas. It's the right place for some of it to be. It's isolated, it's under control, it's high security. Those are things that go with the investigation of flying saucers and any attempts you make to duplicate your own or to fly one of theirs or whatever. I don't think we've yet scratched the surface on what's happening out there with regard to flying saucers.
I've concluded that they are here, whoever they are, wherever they came from, whatever they're doing. Other intelligences are messing around on our planet.
So, whether we believe Lazar's story or not, given the testimony of all these witnesses, scientists, theorists, and dreamers, are we now to believe that aliens are indeed among us?